I can't believe this, Nate says as he looks through the emails. This is great. You see this, Father? When I called Nate and told him I'd do an interview, he was happy. When I told him about what I had found and Helen's response, he was practically speechless. Meeting him at the Perfect Cup the next day and showing him copies of the emails, he is jumping up and down in his chair like a little boy on Christmas morning. Don't you see, now this has everything. It's not just a cold case of a senseless murder, Nate goes on, holding up the emails. This is a cold case of a planned murder. She was stalked, and whoever was stalking her killed her. Now really, we don't know that, I interrupt. And we have the police doing nothing when new evidence is shown to them. He inhales and exhales. Now we have a story. I thought you had a story before? We did, he answers. It's a better story now. And you'll do an interview on camera? Yes, I say, but who's we? We, Nate repeats, my partner and I. What partner? My partner in the film, he replies. Oh, did I forget to mention her? She's meeting us. Oh, here she is now. Nate stands and waves at someone. I turn around to see who. She is young, blonde, pretty, and earnest. Very earnest. I recognize her from one of the local stations in Baltimore. She does those human interest stories that really interest nobody. She leans into Nate and gives him a quick peck on the cheek. Catherine Shep, Nate says, meet Father Tom Greer. She smiles and extends her thin, well-manicured hand. So nice to meet you, Father, she says, her voice as silky as her hair. I take her hand as she covers mine with her other hand and looks into my eyes. I'm really looking forward to working with you, she purrs. I settle down to my usual coffee with cream and 2 sugars as she sips on her decaf soy latte. Nate is there until his uncle comes over to remind him that his break is over. After he excuses himself, Catherine says, I'm glad you've agreed to help me with the story. Me? Yes, I decided that Joan's story needs to be told. She smiles, showing perfectly white teeth behind her expertly colored lips. There is no lipstick on her cup, so it is either very good lipstick, or she has had her lips tattooed. When Nate told me about the story of your wife's murder, I was just so moved, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And then when he told me you came back, and you are now a priest, well, that's just wonderful. I guess an unsolved murder is a bit of a change from doggy beauty pageants. She guffaws. Yeah, not why I went to J-school, that one. I tried to sell my boss on an animal cruelty angle, but he said no one would believe that dog owners who spend $500 on a custom-tailored tuxedo for their pedigreed German Shepherd were guilty of abusing their pets. I guess he's right, but this is my ticket out of that crap and into real hard-hitting stuff. I don't know how hard-hitting this is, I say. Nate tells me you're working on the human interest angle, how her murder has affected others. Well, Shep says with a slight eye roll, Nate and I disagree a little on our view of the project. What's your view? She sits back with an air of triumph. I intend to solve the case. It is so ridiculous I have to laugh a little. She frowns, and I clear my throat. Sorry, Miss Shep. Please call me Catherine. Okay, Catherine. Why do you think you'll be able to solve a 15-year-old murder when the police haven't been able to? Her eyes narrow. Because I'll have your help. Then she leans forward. Nate told me about the new information you have. The emails the police ignored. I'm not going to ignore them. I'll figure out who sent them. Are these the emails? She says, picking them up. I drink my coffee and watch her read through the stack. The further she gets, the more she smiles. Catherine puts the papers down and drinks from her latte. Okay, Father, yes, I definitely think that there is a connection between those emails and your wife's murder. I smile in spite of myself, swept up in her enthusiasm and flattered that someone is finally taking me seriously. Now, she goes on, we've got work to do. I'll need to lay the groundwork. I've told Nate I'll talk about that night on camera. Well, yes, of course we'll need that, but there's more too. What do you mean? I want to get the background, you know, the story behind the story, she says. I want to learn everything you can tell me about Joan, your relationship, the days and weeks leading up to her murder. Did anything stand out in her behavior? Did anything unusual happen? Was there tension between the two of you? Now wait, I'll need to talk to Joan's mother and her friends. I thought Nate already interviewed them? He did, Catherine nods. Then why? Well, She leans towards me, conspiratorially lowering her voice. If I can be candid, Father Tom, Nate's really a behind-the-scenes person. Not an on-camera one. Oh, he's sweet and technically really good, but he doesn't have, she pauses looking for a word, presence that someone who's on camera all the time has. Someone like you, I say. Yes, someone like me, she says, leaning back and tapping the table with her nails. I have the copy of the police file Nate got, she continues. It's so redacted it's practically useless. Fortunately, I know someone who can help get more information on what the police have. How? Catherine smiles. Old boyfriend. He's an officer and married now, but I think I can, persuade him. I squirm. Listen, Catherine, I'd rather you didn't do anything. Oh, she waves dismissively. I'm not going to break any commandments, Father. Maybe bend a little, but not break. She drinks. Besides, you want the truth, right? Sometimes getting to the truth means getting your hands a little dirty. Sometimes the truth itself is dirty. In fact, it usually is, she paused. I'm not sure people know what they're going to get when they say they want the truth. I think they'd be happier if they never knew the truth. I want the truth, I say with more certainty than I felt. What if she is right? What if the truth, the whole truth about Joan's murder, about Joan, about our relationship, is messier than I imagined? She smiles the same white veneer perfect smile. Now, when can I get you on camera? I return the smile, even as one thought runs again and again through my head. What am I getting myself into? A few days later, I am standing in front of the restaurant where we were eating the night of Joan's murder. It is still a restaurant, but the name is different. It had been La Petite Maison and served French food. It is now called Pasta Primo and serves Italian. The decor is also completely different, and the exact table we were sitting at is no longer there, but I can still see the area of the restaurant where it had been. The table for two was by the windows overlooking Main Street. It was the same table in the same restaurant where I had proposed to her a few years earlier. I turn away from the window. Nate has set up a camera on a tripod and is looking through the viewfinder. He looks up, telling Catherine, "All good here." She nods and looks at me. "You can start whenever you're ready, Father." I exhale, having been holding my breath unconsciously until that moment. I am nervous, more nervous than I remember being the Sunday of my first homily. What are you doing? I think. You've spent years avoiding talking about that night. And what are you going to do? Talk about that night. On camera, your every word recorded. Everyone will hear what you say and see how you look when you say it. And for what? What are you hoping to gain from this? Peace, justice, I mumble to myself. Are you sure? You don't really want to talk about it. You know why? I shake my head to still the thoughts. You know why. Where should I begin? I ask. Nate presses a button on the camera and looks through the viewfinder. He adjusts a knob on the sound recorder slung over his shoulder, listening as I speak into the lapel mic. I am dressed in my clericals at Nate's suggestion. Wherever you're comfortable starting, Catherine says. Why were you at the restaurant that night? That night, I repeat. That night was a special night. What made it special? I smiled. It was the anniversary of our first date, which was also the anniversary of the night I proposed. We sat at the same table where we sat when I proposed to her in this restaurant. Well, not this restaurant. It was La Petite Maison back then. So it was a happy night. Yes, very happy, but it got happier. How? Joan had been to the doctor that day, I continued. We had been trying ever since we got married to have a baby. But things hadn't gone well. She had problems getting pregnant. There were a couple of miscarriages along the way. We had just about given up, talked about exploring adoption, even IVF. She was an only child, and I just have a sister, so we wanted to have a large family. I was looking forward to being a dad. I pause a moment. Anyway, I continue, a few days before, Joan had taken a home pregnancy test. We'd had false alarms before, so she scheduled an appointment with her doctor for a more accurate test. She told me what the doctor said over dinner. What had the doctor said? I smile even as I feel a lump in my throat. The beginnings of tears sting my eyes. Even 15 years later, the memories of that night bring up huge emotions in me. I swallow and clear my throat. That we were going to have a baby. How did you feel about that? Catherine asks quietly. Feel I was ecstatic. I knew that there would be a time when it could all go wrong. We'd been down that path before, like I say, but at that moment I was the happiest man on the planet. What was Joan's reaction? She was happy, but guarded, looking back. She had been through a lot. I guess she didn't want to get too excited, not while she could still lose the baby. What did you two do then? I ordered champagne, and then realized that it needed to be sparkling cider. We laughed over that joyful kind of laugh you do when the whole world seems bright. While we ate, we discussed baby names, how to decorate the nursery, talked about whether we were going to need a bigger house. We had started looking at places. At the time, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment that was adequate, but we knew we'd need a bigger place for kids. We wanted a place with a backyard and enough space for lots of kids. Anything else? Oh, just work stuff. I told her about the latest project I had at Worky. Wasn't a priest then, obviously. I was an archivist at Meyer in their archives and manuscript section. Actually, the archivist, there was only one, and I was it. I had just started a preliminary list of the papers of a former senator who had been an alumnus of the college. I remember because it had been a very big deal, the largest collection ever donated to Meyer at the time. I told Joan that I realized that day how big a job it was going to be, and that I might be able to get the college to hire an assistant. She told me about her work. She was getting her design business off the ground and had a few clients. She told me about one client of hers who was proving to be a problem. Didn't she work at the college? Yes, she was an instructor in the fine arts department. Joan had received her art degree there, and they hired her as a part-time instructor. Joan was good. Her students loved her, and the department thought highly of her. The job gave her enough time to work on her business. But she had also hoped the department might take her on as a full-time instructor. So, you finished dinner. What happened next? I look at her. After dinner and dessert, it was getting late, so we left. Where did you go? We walked back to the car. Nate stops the camera and looks up. That's great, Father. Heard everything loud and clear. What we'll do now is walk down the sidewalk to the parking lot. It's that one over there, right? He indicates a small lot between the 2 rows of shops, the one where the restaurant is and the next one with a used bookstore, antique store, and crystal shop. I nod. That was the parking lot where it all happened. Do you want to film me walking? Before Nate can answer, Catherine says, No, that won't be necessary. Nate looks irritated. We get to the lot. It hasn't changed much since that night, it seems, but it had been dark and the lot was not very well lit, so I couldn't see much. I look up. There are more lights now, and cameras. There hadn't been cameras that night. There was no video of what happened. All the police had was my story. I lead them to the part of the lot where I remember we parked, not too far in from the street. Nate sets up his tripod and camera. After a few minutes he says, Okay, when you're ready. I nod and he starts the camera. We had parked about here, I say. We took our time walking here. The night was warm and clear. Just strolled together hand in hand. I remember Joan leaning against me, holding me by my upper arm, resting her head on my shoulder. It was late, so there were not a lot of cars on the street. By the time we got here, the lot seemed empty except for us. I pause. Now is the hard part. I say a quick prayer for strength. What happened next, I went on, is foggy. I'm not sure I remember everything that happened. I remember we arrived at the car. We walked around so I could open her door. Joan liked that. She teased me when I forgot, which was quite often. I heard footsteps coming behind us. I looked up, and there he was, just standing there, holding a gun on us. What did you do? What did I do? What did I do? I froze. I just stared at him. Joan stared too. What did he say? Nothing. That was the strange thing. Nothing. He held the gun on me and grabbed Joan, started dragging her away. What did he look like? I'm not sure. The light wasn't very good. I couldn't make out any features. I could see his eyes, but he was wearing a hoodie, a mask maybe. I stop and stare at the spot in the parking space where my car had been. I am trying to remember what I told the police about what happened next. Joan started screaming, hitting at the guy, trying to pull away. But he was too strong. He said something. I can't remember what. I darted after him. I remember jumping on him, trying to wrestle him away from her. He let go of Joan and she ran back to the car, I think. Then he threw me off. I stop, feeling tears welling up again. Can we stop for a moment? Nate looks up from the camera. Catherine says, "Sure, Father. Take the time you need." I walk away from the spot. My mind is spinning. I know what happened next. I have lived with the memory every day since it happened. The images swirl through my head every night when I try to sleep. I hadn't talked about what happened to anyone, not since the police interviewed me. Now I am being asked to tell the story again. I close my eyes and say a quick prayer, open my eyes, and walk back to Nate and Catherine. "Okay," I say, "I'm ready now." Nate looks through the viewfinder. "Okay, Father." I exhale. He pointed the gun at me. I ran at him and grabbed his arm. I guess I was trying to get the gun away from him. We fought for a minute. I stop and swallow. Then it happened. What happened? I stopped. I couldn't form the words in my mouth. I have lost the ability to speak. "What happened?" Catherine repeats. "A shot," I whisper. "There was a shot." He must have had his finger on the trigger. For a second I thought I had been shot. I didn't feel anything, didn't see any blood. He looked shocked, like he wasn't expecting it. I paused. Then I looked at Joan. I closed my eyes, tears welling up again. But I can't stop now. I just have to get through it. Even in the dim light I could see. Her blouse was white. It was very easy to see the blood. She hadn't screamed or cried out. She just stood there, blood slowly spreading crimson across her front. She began to sway. I ran to her and caught her as she sank to her knees. I started screaming for help. I looked in the guy's direction. He was still standing there. It was like he was transfixed or something. Like he couldn't believe what he had done. I thought I heard him speak. I can't be sure. I was holding Joan, cradling her in my arms, telling her, begging her to hold on until help came. Then suddenly, he walked up to me and held the gun to my head. He looked me right in the eyes. I saw. "What did you see?" "I saw anger, hatred, rage, murderous rage." "Did he say anything to you?" I shake my head. He just stared at me, pointing the gun right here. I point to my forehead between my eyes. I close my eyes. I thought to myself, at least we'll die together. I won't have to live without her then. I heard a click, then another click, a third click. Not a shot, just clicks. Something must have happened to the gun. He moved it away from me. I opened my eyes. He was looking at the gun with disbelief. Then he looked at me and screamed, drew his arm back and slammed the gun into my head. I only remember searing pain, then darkness. "What's the next thing you remember?" Catherine prompts. My breathing is ragged. I came to, I say, and Joan was on top of me. The tears were hot on my cheeks. I rocked her slowly, talking quietly to her. I looked her in the eyes, willing her to be alive. I held her tight, sobbing, asking God to bring her back. But there was no life in her eyes. They stared blankly into mine. She was gone. I stop and lower my head, squeezing my eyes tight against the tears that were about to overwhelm my ability to control them. I squeeze my hands into fists, gritting my teeth, using every fiber of my being to control the emotions welling up from inside me. I feel I am drowning in a sea of my own sadness. It is just like before. It hasn't been this bad in a long time. I shouldn't have done this, I think. This was a mistake. I have lost all awareness of where I am. I am no longer standing in the parking lot, feet from Nate and Catherine and the video camera. I am adrift in a cold void created by the overwhelming pain I have brought back to the surface. I don't know how long I am like that, but the next thing I know, I'm back. I look up. Nate and Catherine are just staring at me. "That's everything," I say. "That's what happened. That's how Joan was killed." That evening I kneel in St. Clair's before the tabernacle. I have just finished evening prayer. I am physically and mentally exhausted. I look at the crucifix, then the tabernacle, comforted by the knowledge that Christ is here with me. I slowly shake my head. One thought keeps repeating over and over again. It started after we finished filming, and I still can't stop it. It's been 15 years. You still can't face the truth.